and it is it's a mono blue kind of control deck. It's something interesting here. Things like Vidalcan Shackles, Sensitive Divining Top, Counterbalance, but it is just mono blue.
Now I see Tal'Aran.
Yeah, Tal'Aran, Sky Summoner, Snapcaster, Vendilion Click. I mean, Devastation Tide is in this deck.
Oh, baby.
Not a card, not really a typical Legacy powerhouse, but the deck seems pretty sweet. And then also Curfew for value in the main deck.
Okay.
Is something else. So I think this deck has some business going on, and I'm kind of excited to see how it plays out.
Got a lot of the blues. As we're going to see Marsh lead off here with a Ponder off of a that's a black border duel.
That's a nice one.
That's not so bad. Now, Rug Delver deck, of course, we are very intimately familiar with. We just saw Matt Costa on camera. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you're rooting for, lose to Will Craddock. Differences between this list and Matt's, you're going to see a lot of fours, of course, in Rug Delver. Things don't really change here. You're going to see 2 Fort Bolts, 3 Spell Pierces, but the card that, does go back and forth, and Osip and I talked about this last round, is Stifle.
Yep.
Some people are really in love with Stifle. I know you personally are not, but you are going to find 4 Stifles here, and they're not really going to have a ton of use, it looks like, in this particular matchup.
But I do think if Stifle's the kind of card that's the style deck you want to play, this is the right place for it. You want to pair it with other mana resource denial cards like Daze and Wasteland, where then you can really crack down on them. Stifle in other decks doesn't really do enough.
Sure. You just really want to use that as a short-term advantage.
Exactly. You want to pressure, get your Nimble Mongoose in play, get your Delver in play, and then ride it out. Using things like Stifle and Daze to kind of counterpunch and just keep them off their game long enough so they can't stabilize, you can kill them quickly. Rug Delver doesn't really want to play, a 25-turn game, an 18-turn game. Its cards are going to get, all those cards are going to go dead as the game goes longer. That said, Stifle still has a lot of value, picking off random Jace triggers. I've had a Jace Ultimate get stifled. That was really embarrassing.
Ugh.
Just completely forgot that could happen.
As we are going to see Marsh search out a tropical island here, and it looks like he's going to follow this up with a Tarmogoyf. So we see Eric does just have a Sensei's Divining Top here. He's going to untap. He'll take a draw here. No top activation on his upkeep. We'll see what he's able to muster here. As I look through mono blue deck list.
Yeah, moving in for the lock here already.
As we see
that's
a counterbalance.
Forced, I assume. I believe that Marsh had a couple forcibles in his hand when we got the chance to peek at it.
So we do see Forcible removing Stifle. You always look, when you're looking at these mono blue deck lists, you're looking for cards like Vidalcan Shackles, stuff like that. What can you do to get a Tarmogoyf for just a creature that gets through off of the board?
Goyf especially is going to be really hard for his deck to deal with if it resolves. And we're seeing he has those curfews to bounce it back, but other than that, there's not a real good way to interact with such a large permanent. It's really hard to Shackles up that guy.
Yeah.
He's large.
And we do see a huge fight here over the counterbalance. You saw Marsh Forcible removing a blue card, Eric Forcible back moving a blue card, and Marsh actually had another Forcible, another blue card. So counterbalance, a card that Marsh is certainly prioritizing this matchup, does not want that to resolve, has just been countered. And now we'll get our Tarmogoyf dice on the screen for you guys to see how big that is.
He's going to be large. So one of the nice things about Tarmogoyf is when you fight over him, he tends to grow during the fight.
Not so bad.
Or when you fight the next turn, right? So in this case, it was out on an enchantment, which is even better.
Yep.
Enchantment's one of the hard ones to get in the graveyard.
And so we do see a 4/5 Tarmogoyf here, so the beatdowns are going to begin. And Marsh, of course, only does have 2 cards left in his hand because of that forcible action. We'll see what he has
Eric
left.
has the Shackles in his hand. So
Ooh.
No islands, though, so it's going to be a tricky business getting those. Here, I actually expect him to top in his upkeep.
Maybe try to hit that land drop, but he's going to take a draw.
Okay, that worked out. So now we can ponder, pick one, and then shuffle the other 2 away.
And we do see Scalding Tarn, and you are going to see a ponder here.
Even here, though, I'm not sure how many 1 or 2 mana spells this deck has that we would even cast here. I kind of even like topping there first. Top, see what the business is going on, see if there's something you even want to get, shuffle it away. It really just depends on, are you ever using 2 mana on this turn?
Sure.
And looking at his list here, I guess maybe you can find another counterbalance, but even that, I'm more worried about the permanents in play.
Sure. And we are going to see a shuffle here with a ponder. So mystery card coming. Obviously is not activated his Sensitive Divining Top yet, but it will clear for Sensitive Divining Top just for future reference. And he does have, as you said, that 1 Vidalcan Shackles in his deck list in his hand, so that's threatening to try to take this game over. I think the reason you don't see him slam it down that turn is because maybe a little bit fear of a Spell Pierce, maybe fear of a
Spell Pierce or
Daze.
Daze, no reason. And also just playing it this turn isn't why let his opponent know that's what's coming. It's not going to really accomplish anything there. Leave your mana up. You're not going to be able to activate it next turn, realistically.
So you do see Marsh untap, he draws. Tarmogoyf's going to come across again, and he's just going to, likely just try to ride this bad boy to victory. It doesn't look like he has very much else. The body language from here does feel a little bit sluggish. Could be trying to reel Eric in a little bit, but doesn't seem like he has very much going on right now.
Yeah, so Curfew is an interesting card. I think it's a card that we don't really often see in Legacy, but it's probably his best answer at this point. That's what he probably was digging for here, is to get that
Yeah, I mean, look, searching for Curfew. I can't remember what set is this from.
It's from
We're
Saga
old.
Block,
We're
I
old.
think.
I think it's actually from Urza Saga. Yeah, it is from Saga.
Here we see
and there it is.
So you can see it helping me out here too. I couldn't remember if it was instant or sorcery, and I didn't want to admit that. But now we can see it here on the screen. It is an instant. He could have found it there right then with the top, but did not. But he chose not to shuffle, so he must have found something he liked that he wanted to keep going here. But so oftentimes in these Goyf matchups, when you're playing the control deck, and this comes up a lot when you're playing, from in my experience, Esper.
Sure.
Is you got to take a lot of hits on that guy because you don't have an answer ready right away, and it gets bug Goyf decks. You don't mind going down to like 4 or 3. Against Rug Delver, they have a lot of burn. It gets pretty dangerous turning that burn on game 1, which is normally a pretty mediocre set of cards for them.
Sure.
Making those things that are going to kill you. So it's a little nerve-wracking there. Here we see him actually shuffling away his top.
Yeah, so we did see another top in his hand right now. He does search out with the Scalding Tarn, just a basic island. 16 islands in his deck, 4 Misty Rainforest, 2 Scalding Tarns. So he is all islands because he is playing 2 copies of Back to Basics and wants to make himself Wasteland proof. So we've seen this before with your mono blue deck that had Energy Field before. We have seen an Athens blue take, as we are going to see Eric tap 3 mana here. He's going to play Vidalcan Shackles, a card that we'll also bring up on the screen for you guys. We've seen this card dominate formats before, and it doesn't see a ton of legacy play anymore. But
here we see a double Daze potentially. He's tapping 2 mana. No, now we're tapping 1, so maybe it's a Spell Pierce. Spell Pierce obviously is the nightmare scenario here for Eric. Since he only has this 1 copy of Shackles in his deck, he has no redundancy on this.
And now you're going to see Marsh cast a Daze and
mana.
float. Okay.
So this is an odd sequencing here. I assume he's casting a second Daze, which is what I first thought we tapped 2 mana was using double Daze, which he is.
And now there's your other Daze.
So I guess it doesn't really matter the ordering here, but I'm not sure why. There's some weird things with Rug Devil where it actually wants to get cards into its hand in some spots.
Yep.
Where it actually wants lands off the table. So maybe this is one of those occasions, and he would rather actually have the land back.
And now you see a 3rd Force of Will plus a blue card here for Eric on that day. So Vidalcan Shackles has been forced through. You take a look at Marsh's deck list here, no way for him to get that off the table. The best he can do is maybe stifle a few activations of that, but I think you can agree with me, that's certainly not ideal.
Not ideal. We need that Goyf to grow 1 more really badly. So right now we're enchantment, sorcery, land, instant. Yep. So we need to get a creature into our graveyard, which is going to be pretty tricky business here.
And so now we see Marsh reaching for that Tarmogoyf. It's certainly going to come across as you see him do some counting here.
Count.
Yeah, the same math that you've just done. It is just a 4/5, so it's going to come across.
The hopeful one. You're like, I hope this has changed somehow. Let me look at this again. And it's no, still looking bad.
We saw in our last match that we had on camera, Costa was able to get Craddock down to 1 on the last turn of the game. He went through some things with Wastelanding himself to make those Nibble Mongoose into 3/3s, but just not enough to get it through. So now Eric has Public Enemy number 1 in play with Vidalcan Shackles looming to take that Tarmogoyf. And this is a problem for Rug Delver. The thing with Rug Delver, Tom, is that, its goal is to make sure that some things just don't resolve.
Yep.
Show and Tell being a big one, maybe Sneak Attack as well. And Vidalcan Shackles, while it's not a very commonly played card, this is a card that they cannot let resolve.
Agreed. Oh, it's absolutely that category. Here we saw, Marsh fought pretty hard over that counterbalance and came back to bite him. Well, they probably had to do that because counterbalance is another card that deck has a really hard time beating, especially once top's in play. And it's just unfortunate for him that Eric drew multiple trump cards for the matchup, including his 1 of Shackles.
So now we do see Eric, he resolves a Sensitive Divine top. He's going to spin it on his main phase as well, get a little bit of information, going to put those cards back. I think of those cards, one of them I believe I did see was a counterbalance.
He's counterbalance on top now.
Yeah, he's willing to just pass the turn back here.
This is a little dangerous potentially. I mean, not main phasing, just taking that Goyf. I'm trying to think if there's anything that can punish him. Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah, but I think running Stifle might be just the biggest fear here.
Yeah, I would have just taken it right away, because if it gets stifled, it gets stifled. It's going to stifle the other time.
Yep.
But I don't want to give him the chance to draw it.
So now we are going to see Eric pull the trigger, activate the Vidalcan Shackles, crossing his fingers, hoping Tarmogoyf's going to come to his side of the battlefield.
Or at the very least do it in the upkeep. That way he spends the mana on his own turn, but hasn't drawn that card yet.
Let's see, Marsh taking a look at his cards here. He did draw and play a Misty Rainforest, and he is going to pass the Tarmogoyf over.
That is unfortunate. This is going to make short work of this game, I suspect. It's been really hard to come back from that.
And Eric basically saying, I don't need creatures of my own. That's what Shackles is for. I'll just take yours. And he does leave his Shackles tapped, and Counterbalance is going to come into play right off the top of his deck. We'll see if Marsh is going to be able to fight over this. You're going to see him tap a mana. We're going to see a Lightning Bolt go upstairs, attempting to put Eric down to 2, which does resolve. And we'll see if he does have another one or not.
Unfortunately, no.
It does not look like it, so...
And now we're going to have a really hard time getting through this top balance lock, because all the burn spells, in these traditionally, and yet looks like this case too, in these Rug Delver decks cost 1.
Yep.
And there's no more window for no longer a window for 1 mana spells to resolve.
Yeah, Marsh is gonna have to get a little bit creative to try to get a 1 mana spell through here. Borderline impossible when there's a Sensitive Dying Top plus a counterbalance in play. He can get a little bit nifty, but that's hard to do as he does just draw a Tropical Island and pass the turn back. This one's white bordered. Blasphemy.
Yeah, that's hard to look at. The glare on that border is really harsh on the eyes.
I was loving the black bordered lands, but we see the real truth. He's working on his collection of all black bordered ones. You do see a Sensitive Divine Top activation there for Eric on Marsh's end step. He's going to untap, he's going to draw, he's going to float some things on the top of his deck via counterbalance. He's going to come across with Tarmogoyf, and that's going to be his plan for this game. This time you do see in his hand Vidillion Click and a Devastation Tide.
Yep. Ooh, in the draw step we're clicking here? Okay.
So he's going to take a look at Marsh's hand. Most likely going to target Marsh, and he does. And you see a Volcanic Island and a Scalding Tarn.
This is a black border volcanic.
Yeah, pretty.
We're keeping score here. We're at 3-1 for the black borders. But yeah, this game is very over.
Yeah.
Getting a head start, and here we see Marsh agrees with that perception, scooping it up. Let's look at sideboarding now. I think, what do we expect on this mono blue deck? If you're Marsh, you're wondering, man, what am I playing against? Where is this guy going? What can he do to me? I think it's pretty tricky to play against such an unknown element.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fun. I mean, we've seen mono blue decks in the past. We have seen, your Athens Blues takes. We've seen players win with those decks before. Back to basics, first and foremost. I think a card that Marsh should be scared of. But taking a look at the sideboard here, you see 2 Flusterstorm, you see 2 Pithing Needle, 2 Surgical Extractions, another copy of Back to Basics in his sideboard to go with 2 in the main deck.
Cavern Scales.
Culling Scales. Okay.
Kind of cutting ahead here a little bit. That one jumped out at me. That's a spicy one.
Got 2 Energy Fields, a Devastation Tide, a Cavern, a Wormcoil Engine, the Spellskite, and a Factor Fiction. Tom, you're sideboarding with this deck against Rug Delver. Outside of Back to Basics, I think it's pretty obvious. Anything else that you'd want to bring in here? Jump out at you.
I mean, Back to Basics, even that card, I'm not sure is that powerful in this match. I mean, you certainly are going to bring it in, but 3 mana sorceries that don't impact the board against a deck that's going to usually be ahead of you at that point in the game.
Yep.
Granted, largely locks out going forward. It is worth it, but it's not going to be as powerful here as against some decks, just because you can just be so far behind already. I mean, Wormcoil Engine, you have a really hard time resolving a 6 mana sorcery speed spell in this matchup. I don't think you want to go there, unless you also bring in the Cavern potentially.
Sure.
That's one direction you could go. I think more important is kind of look at the main deck and see what do we want to cut, right? Because that's really that's going to dictate what we want to bring in. And honestly, I'm really not sure how good some of these cards, like Talrand, are in this matchup. 4 mana, sorcery speed, expensive, easily disrupt with your dazes, but very powerful at resolves.
Yep.
Because it's likely that the Rug Delver deck is boarding out most of its burn because they haven't seen any. They saw 1 click.
Yep.
They're not going to be leaving in their fork bolts or and all their bolts. They got to make room for some action over there. So I could easily see them cutting burn and then Talrand can just take over the game by himself. Devastation Tide, no idea if that's good or not in this matchup.
Sure.
I suspect it probably is because it's a good way to get the Mongoose off the table, given that attacks, but we know the way to interact with that card. So I think you probably can't cut those. I can see cutting Counterspell, just kind of slow, a little clunky. I can even see cutting Spell Pierce potentially. It is good for winning counter wars, but I think a lot of the counters are going to start because you're tapping out or trying to resolve a threat.
Okay.
So keeping that 1 man up for that is going to be challenging.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to do, and that opens up your days too.
Exactly. So I think Spell Pierce is an awkward card against Rug Delver frequently, in that you don't want to load up on them. Maybe 1 or 2 to keep them honest, but it's a card that you don't want to go overboard with. Really, I think you should kind of rely on your counterbalance top blocks as your primary plan. You can cut some Force of Wills here because it is somewhat of it can become a grindy matchup, but at the same time, Rug Delver beats you, I think, with a lot of its tempo draws. So you're willing to sacrifice a little card advantage for Force of Will. So maybe cut 1 or 2 of those. I don't think you want to go down to 0.
Yeah, and we saw just that last game. Force of Will was huge for Eric. It did make Marsh have to commit another Force of Will of his own to fight with that counterbalance. And then when he did try to attempt that Vidalcan Shackles, he had a Force of Will days to get through.
Exactly.
So we saw the power of Force of Will. I agree with you that there are draws that are available in Eric's deck where it is pretty bad.
But at the same time, when his deck is so focused on resolving a few critical spells like a Shackles, like a Counterbalance, that's the kind of time you think Force Will becomes better in your deck. You're willing to sacrifice a lot of resources to get that one thing to resolve. Yep. You expect it to win on your own. In a deck where your cards are all kind of more similar in power level and you don't really care which one resolves, giving that card advantage is a bigger drawback. Why don't we take a look at the Rug Delver deck and see what maybe he's thinking about bringing in here? When
you're Marsh, the first thing that you think of that you lost to that game, you think that you lost to Force of Will. The other thing you think you lost to is, of course, Vidalcan Shackles.
Yep.
So in my mind, you kind of look for an answer to that. You find 1 Ancient Grudge in the sideboard immediately. So that's probably going to come in. The cards, we'll just list them very quickly for you guys. 2 Blue Elemental Blast, 2 Submerge, a Crozing Grip, 2 Rough and Tumbles, a Divert, that Ancient Grudge, 3 Red Elemental Blast, a Life from the Loam, Scavenging Ooze, and a Surgical Extraction. So this is what we have seen Rug sideboards kind of degenerate into. Yep. a lot of singletons or 2-ofs that people can brainstorm and ponder into. Obviously, I think Ancient Grudge is going to join you, maybe Corrosion Grip as well.
I think Corrosion Grip much more so than Ancient Grudge because you want an answer to counterbalance when it resolves, and also it picks up the shackles on the back end.
Yep.
Ancient Grudge, I think, actually might be a mistake to bring in. He might bring it in if he doesn't know how many shackles there are.
Sure.
There's only one.
Yep.
It's actually not a card that, if you knew the list, between just the 1 shackles and the 1 Umezawa's Jite that are in Eric's deck, I think that I'd really want to be bringing in. But it would not surprise me if it does come in this case.
Yeah, it's nice that we have the privilege of knowing
exactly.
that.
Perfect information helps a lot.
Yeah, when you're out there playing, you kind of have to make those guesses, and if you're Marsh, you might not even be familiar with this mono blue deck and how many of those numbers. You could very easily think that, oh, this guy's just trying to win with like a bunch of shackles and maybe like 2 Vanilla Clicks and Jace.
Yep.
You know.
So obviously Rebs are going to come in here. Red Elemental Blast. That's probably, when you're playing it's mono blue, a card that blows up any blue permanent or counters any blue spell. Seems like it would be good.
Yep.
Divert, I could see potentially coming in. It's an interesting card.
An interesting one here as well that you actually see Rug Delver board in a lot in these matchups that get a little bit grindy is Life from the Lung.
Sure.
And you see him board that in because they want to hit their land drops, and 2, they want to try to wasteland lock their opponent. Does Marsh know that Eric has no non-basics?
Probably. I mean, we saw multiple fetches get activated.
Okay.
Only got an island. I can't imagine he expects it to be non-basics. I expect that to work. And trying to go long by getting his own lands isn't going to happen.
Okay. So I mean, he definitely has a lot of options here. But as you said, you know, the one thing that he has to try to keep in mind is what do you want to sideboard out? And is it just easy to go straight to those lightning bolts and those fork bolts and just
fork
move
bolts
on
for
from
sure
there?
gone. I mean, those are the first 2 things to go. Potentially, you can try to cut some stifles, since if you know your wasteland plan's not going to be working anyway. Do you want to be on this on a partial mana denial plan? I think that's something I would consider cutting as well. In the same mindset, Days could potentially be something you're gonna cut there too, because if you think I'm going to lose that battle trying to resource constrain them, I'm upgrading my situational counterspells and dazes to these red elemental blasts, which are more powerful.
Sure.
So I'm gonna make that kind of 1-for-1 trade. Sure. I'd probably shave the burn first. I'd probably cut both bolts, maybe even all 4 lightning bolts. Sorry, both fork bolts.
Sure.
And maybe all 4 lightning bolts before I touched those dazes and stifles. But I could see those stifles definitely, kind of making their way to the sideboard as well.
Yeah, there's also, as we do see Marsh going to take a mulligan down to 6 here. He is on the play. Eric is going to be on the draw, and he's happy with the 7. There's also a little bit of fear as you're talking about the cards you're going to sideboard out here. Certainly everything you're saying makes sense in theory.
Yep.
One thing to keep in mind as well is when you're sideboarding out those blue cards like a Stifle, less blue cards for Force of Will.
Certainly a concern there. It can be. I think we're still probably hovering around the right number, but it is definitely something you're going to be worried about.
So Marsh is going to take a look at his 6. He looks happy. He's going to sacrifice a land. He's going to go down to 19. We'll see which non-basic he searches out. And if he does have a turn 1 play, if it's a Mongoose, if it's Delver of Secrets, or if it's just time for a little bit of manipulation with Ponder.
Really, I'm sure he's very much hoping for a Delver here. You need to get off to an aggressive start in this match, I think, with the Rug deck.
Yeah.
You're not, again, because so many of your cards like Stifle and Daze lose power over the course of the game, you need to maximize your burst in the early game here. And Mongoose is certainly a great threat against this deck. Unfortunately, he does have Curfew and Devastation Knight interact with it. And on a mulligan, it's harder to get it going. A mulligan on the play.
Yep.
So you've got to see 7 cards and get 7 cards in your graveyard.
That's true.
And that just takes some time to do.
So we are going to see Eric sacrifice the Misty Rainforest. He's going to search up an island. We'll see if he has maybe a Sensei's Divining Top or anything else interesting to do on turn 1. And he has a Ponder. So a little bit of manipulation here. As we do go back and forth between these 2 players, a card that we saw from Matt Costa in his sideboard, a card that I think would be very useful for Marsh that he does not have access to, and something that we saw Todd Anderson have great success with last time we were here when he won the Invitational. He had 1 Sylvan Library in his main deck, 1 in his sideboard.
Sure.
A card that has starting to become the industry standard for rug decks. Do you like that card as well in this deck?
It depends again on kind of what matchups you're expecting. I think I like Marsh's take here, where it's very streamlined. Again, when you know what you want to do, which is I want to kill you quickly and I want to keep you off your mana base, Sylvan Library does not play into that plan.
Sure.
Right? Sylvan Library is a resource, it restocks your hand, but the games are going a little bit longer for that. It's still very powerful. I don't hate having one of them here, but I think you really want to know what the metagame you're expecting. It's a hedge that maybe you don't need to take necessarily, and Marsh decided he really wants to kill people as fast as possible.
So we're going to see no Mongoose come across. He's going to follow up with the Tarmogoyf, and talking about killing people as fast as possible. You're seeing that right now. He's putting the pedal to the metal. No manipulation. We don't really know the contents of his hand, but he has an aggressive draw this game. But Force of Will removing Talran is going to be here from Eric. Talran, the card that we'll bring up on the screen. The namesake card of this deck, but it also doesn't hurt that it's blue and you can remove the Force of Will.
Yeah, absolutely true. And here, now Marsh, seeing that, I wonder if that's going to, if we get to the 3rd game, knowing that they're going to change how he sideboarded.
Now we're going to see a Misty Rainforest get sacrificed here for Rill. Going to search out another basic island. We'll see what his follow-up is going to be. Maybe a Naked Counterbalance, among other options that he does have available in his deck. Talron's an interesting card. I think it's a card that it wouldn't surprise me if Talron was actually good in Legacy. and that people just
Sure.
overlooked it. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. Because when you think of your blue decks and your 4 mana spells in a blue deck, obviously the first card that comes to mind is Chase the Mind Sculptor.
Yep.
And this is certainly a unique take on something that a blue deck can do. And if it is bad, it's certainly nice that you can just remove it to Force of Will and move on with life.
I mean, so you think about what it's competing with, and so if you think about the bug mirror matches we had a few months ago when that deck was very popular, one of the trumps in the mirror was Garrett Relentless,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Making those wolf tokens just going along there. Talon kind of playing a similar role
Yep.
to Garrick. With the upside, he can get removed. Downside, he can die to some removal spells. But the parent removal spell in that matchup is Abrupt Decay, where he dodges that. So I like him in that sort of a role in some of those decks.
As we did see Marsh play another Nimble Mongoose on his turn, Eric, main face Snapcaster Mage, going to Ponder, and actually Marsh is considering...
Red Elemental Blasting. Ooh,
he's
stifling the trigger.
Ooh, okay, so he left them in. So this is just an ambush Viper right now. How do you feel about that?
When you're this far behind in resources and you need to get cards in your graveyard, I think that's a reasonable play.
Okay.
You basically counter to Ponder, like right there, and I think that's something you would choose to do if you had the option on this board state. So I like that play. You don't know if you're ever going to have another target for the Stifle.
Now here's a better question. As we do see an attack here, no monkeys come across. Marsh trades out with the Snapcaster Mage. How do you feel about the attack of both of those?
Really depends on your hand. If he had 3 cards in his graveyard previously, right? He just had the Tarmogoyf, the Stifle, and the fetch land he's used. That's a long way from 7.
Sure.
With only 2 cards in your hand, if neither one gets a clean way to get the graveyard on its own, you need to start stocking the graveyard. The best way to do that is trade off one Goose. So I think that play is very reasonable. What I'm afraid of here now, if I'm Marsh, is getting my Mongoose picked off by a click or another Ambush Viper Snapcaster Mage in combat. That's what scares me.
As we do see Misty Rainforest get sacrificed here, so it looks like Marsh is up to 5 cards in his graveyard. New Mongoose is getting closer as he does search out a Volcanic Island. 2 cards left in his hand. We don't know the contents of Marsh's hand. Feels like some permission, obviously.
I mean, what else would he hasn't played a land, so it's not land. Unless he's just holding land, which is certainly possible if he's hoping to draw a Brainstorm.
And it looks like to me, Tom, that he is thinking the same thing that you just brought up. Can I afford to let my Nimble Mongoose get picked off by Snapcaster Mage or a Vendilion Click? And you do see Vendilion Click right now.
That is really unfortunate for Marsh here, and I think so. We can't see his whole graveyard actually. It looks like he may even have 2. It's off to the side of that fetch land. Interestingly, he chose to fetch. There we go. You know, we can see that Misty kind of hiding off to the side. Interestingly, he chose to fetch there, because one of the things he might be hoping to do is draw a Brainstorm and shuffle away some of those dead cards that are in his hand.
Yep.
And if he's not going to use that mana right away, I don't quite see the utility there in just cracking and attacking for 1.
So now we see Marsh considering his options with that Vendilion Click. It's going to resolve. You see Stifle and Daze, the last 2 cards in his hand. So they were 2 permission cards. And now Eric has the decision of, are you going to take either one of those cards and put them at the bottom? And it looks like
Certainly
the answer
not.
is no.
Certainly, those cards do nothing. And instantly trade. Yeah, this game is now going to be very hard for Marsh to win. Because, because his cards are individually pretty low impact. What threat can he draw here that Eric's going to be afraid of? I mean, maybe a Goyf right off the top is best case scenario, and having, this is another Talrand.
So he does have a backup Talrand Sky Summoner. We'll bring that up on the screen for you guys again. Whenever he does play a blue instant or sorcery, 2/2 Drakes are going to be coming into play, and we know Marsh's hand is a Daze and a Stifle. So yes, he can probably stifle one of these triggers, but I mean that's not a great use of a Stifle, obviously. And you saw Eric play a land to get around the Daze, so now Marsh does just draw and play a Scalding Tarn. He's going to have to pass the turn back, and Talrand, a card that you don't see a lot of Legacy, is threatening to take this game over. Here's the $1 million question, though. If you've watched any of our SCG Live coverage, you know that we do have tokens always at the ready.
Very true.
Do we have a Drake token? Do we have a 2/2 Drake token? As you do see, Eric is going to come across here. He did draw back to basics for the turn. So now he's putting the Stranglehold on on Marsh, and he's basically attacking him from 2 very, very different angles.
Marsh gets to play 1 more spell this game.
Yeah. 2 very, very different angles he's attacking Marsh from.
I can't think of 1 spell, much less even 3 or 4 spells that are winning this game from a Rug Delver perspective. And this, again, when Rug Delver gets off to the slower starts or gets its start kind of disrupted, it doesn't have the raw power to come back in its most Legacy decks. And this is one reason why that's a deck that I've never really been a fan of, because I want my decks to have that kind of ability to play from behind a little bit.
And now you're going to see another haymaker here from Eric with Vidalcan Shackles. So even now, if Marsh does draw a Tarmogoyf, 1, it's not going to have that large of an impact on the game because Eric can take it, and 2, those lands are tapped forever. And so now you see kind of the power of this mono blue deck, where it does attack from these unique angles. Talrand, a card that you don't see a lot of, but it can certainly threaten to win the game on its own. You see Back to Basics, a card again that you don't see a lot of. You normally think of Blood Moon as that type of an effect. that can win the game on its own, especially against the Rug Delver deck if it can come down in a certain situation. We see a Brainstorm here from Marsh looking for a little bit of help. That's going to be a Spell Pierce and generate
Spell Pierce, making it 2/2 and permanently locking down 2 lands is really a pretty good Spell Pierce.
That might be the best Spell Pierce I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Outside of counting Jace the Mind Sculptor, that might be the best Spell Pierce I've ever seen before.
It's certainly the best Spell Pierce I've seen that doesn't counter anything.
Yeah. And again, Vidalcan Shackles here just looming.
An odd fetch now coming.
So we are going to see a fetch here for Marsh. He's going to search out
when
Tropical
you're brainstorming
Island.
is certainly not where you want to be.
Yeah, you don't see that one very often. Looks like he has his own Spell Pierce here.
Right.
Or Stifle. He's going to stifle the
Drake.
Sure.
Interesting. Why not just use one of our lands in play?
Not quite sure.
I mean, if he's not letting the brainstorm, he knows brainstorm's countered, then maybe it makes sense to shuffle now and not draw a land next turn.
Yeah. And so now Eric is saying, is the Spell Pierce okay?
Whoa,
he's going to pay.
paying.
So I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure what Marsh's plan here is. Maybe he doesn't quite understand back to basics. I'm not quite sure. But I mean, he's just basically tapped all his mana. Those 4 lands are done.
Gone. They're gone. We can move those over to the side.
Yeah.
Have you played against a few chokes in my time? It's not a good feeling. I've not actually ever been back to basic locked like this, but I've been choked out.
Let me tell you, choke is something that never happens to me. Can't happen when you don't play blue, Tommy.
That is very true.
I'm the one casting the chokes most of the time. Now let's talk about back to basics really quick here, because again, a card I did bring up is Blood Moon, a card that you do see more often maybe to provide that effect. Back to basics in this deck, when you do have mono islands, is a card that we have seen have some impact on Legacy. Not a huge impact, but we have seen people try this mono blue strategy before. Is this a strategy, as we do see counterbalance off the top?
There's a 3 nice rips he's had here.
Not
back
the
to
worst draw
basics,
steps.
Vidalcan Shackles, counterbalance.
Hey, you play the cards in your deck so that you can draw there.
I don't disagree with that there.
That's how that works. Is back to basics a card that you could see having maybe a little bit more play in Legacy, or is it a little bit too narrow to have a huge effect?
I think it's lacking a good home is the real problem.
Okay.
Because most decks it hurts you as well as them, and you don't want to play such a. Whereas Blood Moon, it certainly affects some of your lands too. You're playing Blood Moon decks that can take advantage of having the red mana, so you don't mind as much.
Yep.
Having your mana shut off is a pretty big cost, and that's so the symmetrical nature of that card I think is big downside.
I know. Even when we were talking about how you like to play the Stoneblade decks, you like a lot of basics in your deck, and you like to search for basics. So back to basics.
That many basics. I mean, that's still be a reasonable human being here, Cedric. I have four basics. I'm not playing back to basics. I have 4 basic.
No, I'm just
saying,
saying,
non-basic decks.
You're the kind of player who doesn't seem to really fear back to basics. Is what I would think.
I still don't want to keep resolving against me.
Sure.
I like my mana. I want to be able to spend more than 2 or 3 in a turn, and
hopefully no punishment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not very friendly. It's just not a friendly card.
That's true.
I want to play my spells, you play your spells. Let's see who wins. Let's have a good, honest fight.
That's not how I like to play Magic.
I know, and that's why you are a bad person.
Oh wow, bad person's been announced. I own this booth. We can get you out of here, buddy. As we do see, Marsh is going to play Volcanic Island. He's going to pass the turn back. Talaren is just looking to get over those last couple points of damage. Poke. Yeah, just poke on away. That's what Talaren's going to do this game. It can't threaten to make another Drake. I can't imagine that we have a Drake token, but I really hope we do.
We did. Really one was ready. Do. One came on screen.
Do we have one on screen?
One came on screen, ready to jump in before the cypher took place.
I can't believe it.
Yeah, they are. The staff here, this is a crack staff.
Pretty
Cedric.
good. Pretty good.
They are ready for anything that may happen.
You told me Talaren's going to play this tournament. I wouldn't have believed you. But somebody at Star City knew. Little inside information, perhaps. So we are going to see just a shuffler of the fetch land. I don't think there's any coming back for this game for Marsh. Don't like to pronounce a game over at any point, as anything can happen in Magic, but it just seems like the combination of cards that are going to have to happen here, I don't even think they exist for Marsh right now.
Marsh could activate a Grizzlebrand 10 times here, not pay any life for it, and still die in like 3 turns.
And so now you're going to see Marsh stop Eric on his upkeep. Looks like he's going to maybe lightning bolts, perhaps.
I mean, as we think about Bolt here and trying to stop him from.
But he does just give Eric the green light. You see counterbalance to draw for him. You see the culling scales
in hand.
Yeah, culling scales in hand. A card we'll bring up on screen for you guys. A card that Eric is not going to need to win this game, as you're going to see Red Elemental Blast. That's what he's going to stop him for. Counterbalance off the top.
Ooh, man, how unlucky.
Yeah, very unlucky. As you do see Vendilion click the card revealed here.
All right, well, this one's going to go a little slower now. The game is still just as over, but it's going to take us a little bit longer to realize that result. Marsh, just for the record, is down to what? Down to 2 mana sources left. 1 mana source left. He gets to spend 2 mana the rest of this game.
Yeah.
He has 1. Oh no, he has Wastelands, so he has 2 colored mana.
Yeah, yeah.
He has one more Volcanic Island left, so he can get 1 more red mana, 1 green mana, or 2 blue mana, and 4 colorless, and that is it.
That is it.
That is it.
Use that mana wisely, my friend.
And he knows there's a vanilla click coming.
Yeah. Gonna be tough.
So that's gonna take the red mana.
So
now we got a green mana.
As we are going to see Force of Will, removing Stifle, counterbalance, checking.
Oh, see, if I'm glad it hit there. Hitting there would just be rubbing it in.
Yeah, that's true. We
don't need that. Let's be civil here.
So Vendilion Click is going to bite the dust. Marsh is going to go down to 5. You're going to see Eric is going to sacrifice Scalding Tarn.
Looks like for that Brainstorm. Not looking like the best mana resource decision.
Well, if you're going to make that payment, you're going to pay a lot for that Muffler.
That was not
That's not coming back. As we are going to see Eric sack that Scalding Tarn, shuffle, pass the turn back, does want a fresh draw step. He knows the top card's Island, no interest in that. Marsh trying to untap those lands. Says that Urza Saga rare and back to basics. Eric's going to untap, he's going to draw. Really just looking for any way to close this game out.
Devastation Tide, we're not going to choose to not miracle that one.
No miracles
here. We don't need that miracle. Really what... Okay, that one gets 1 land left, the final land. So what Marsh needs to be doing here, it needs to be planning, I guess, all in on Corrosive Grip, right? That's his out, is Corrosive Grip back to basics.
Corrosive Grip is certainly one of the outs. One of the other outs right now, too, I feel, Tom, is Nimble Mongoose off the top.
A Nimble Mongoose could, yeah.
That could ride him to victory.
Less so now, we see this interesting, aggressive Brainstorm usage here. I typically am a proponent of aggressive brainstorming.
Okay.
And more so than I think a lot of other people, especially in spots like this where you don't have a play, but when you have counterbalance specifically in play, and you don't have a top, I think this brainstorm is a little more aggressive. You don't need to do it here. You're so far ahead in this game.
Sure.
And again, like you just mentioned, the one way it's the one thing you're really scared of, and we don't see what he puts back, but the one thing you're really scared of is a Nimble Mongoose.
Sure.
Oh, now a Curfew in Eric's hand, giving him some redundancy there. Maybe put a 1 back on top so he's not really afraid of that, but I like just holding off on that brainstorm.
They're going to see Marsh sacrifice that polluted delta. He's going to search out that last volcanic island. So he has, taking a look at his deck list again, 3 tropical islands, 4 volcanic islands, all in play, 4 wastelands, and then a bunch of fetch lands left. So you got to use that 2 mana well. There's no going back here.
Don't spend that. Don't spend the rest of your allowance on frivolous things.
As Marsh is going to draw a card, and it looks like he's just going to pass the turn back. So Eric is going to get himself out of his brainstorm block.
It's possibly even boarded out some wastelands, which is something some red decks play, because if you think about their mana, their spells they're casting, colorless mana almost doesn't exist, right? With the exception of Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, that's true.
That when you realize wastelands are going to be dead, you can board them out. Wow! He's
going to go brainstorm.
Now Corrosive Grip's gone, so I guess he's now all in on Elemental Blast on the back to basics, resolving through 2 counterbalances. You see him there. He understands that his play. He's just having a little bit of fun, I think. But there's still some tiny margin of victory here that I think we may have just lost a little bit of that equity.
Yeah, it's not it's improbable, but not impossible.
Agreed.
As he is now out of green mana for the rest of this game, those tropical islands will never be turned back on.
Barring a red Elemental Blast resolving. Which seems very unlikely.
So you are going to see Marsh put some cards back here.
We have it right now. We need to try.
You're going to see him play
So we get to shuffle away those lands.
Yep.
To the turn that we killed off the Talrand with that red Elemental Blast, was back to basics already in play?
I do not believe that was the case. I don't remember for sure.
I thought it might have been, but I don't recall either. I know we didn't discuss it then. We should have maybe should have considered. If it had been played, we probably would have looked at just maybe killing that thing off instead. So it probably was not. Well, to be fair, those Drakes got out of hand pretty quickly.
Well, actually, no, it wasn't play because Talon's in play. He Elemental Blasted and then Spell Pierce on that. Was that correct? Was that the thing he Spell Pierce or he Spell Pierce a Brainstorm?
Spell Pierce a Brainstorm previously.
Okay, I take it back.
But I think it was previously, not. And that's when we saw the Stifle. Yeah, so it was in play.
Sure.
Because he Brainstorm, Spell Pierce, Stifle the Drake.
Sure. Yep.
Pay for it.
Yep.
Next turn, Elemental Blast. So yeah, so that turn, this game might have gone differently if we had tilled that back to basics. Granted, the Talrand plus the Drake would have been pretty bad, but at least we'd have been able to play some spells. Ooh.
So we're going to see a Daze.
Now we have some lands back on. Something we forgot to consider.
Back.
Marsh outthinking us here in the booth. That should have been a pretty obvious line to get more mana.
So we do see Ponder here. Marsh is going to Daze that. Daze on the stack. 2 counterbalance triggers. First one goes on, reveals an island, so Eric is going to sack in between the Misty Rainforest.
Why are we doing this?
Well, he wants to counter the Daze.
Why are we trying to counter this Daze? Why are we showing Marsh our top of our deck? Let's pay 1.
And take a look.
Okay.
There's an island. So Daze is paid for. So, Tom, you're not an advocate of showing the top cards of the deck there.
The first one was nice because you have a shuffle effect in play.
Sure.
So you get to shuffle away a card you don't want.
Sure.
But now the second one is just giving them information.
Sure, you don't want to give away free information. Gotcha.
No freebies on my watch.
So Sensei's Divine Top is the card that is drawn there. Sensei's Divine Top is going to come into play. It looks like that's going to resolve. So now we do see the Sensei's Divine Top double counterbalance lock with, back to basics and Vendalken Shackles. We're going to see Force of Will here. And Devastation Tide.
Well, Marsh is like, come on, I can't even have a little bit of fun
Let's
here.
bring Devastation Tide up on the screen because while it doesn't really have a significant impact on the game right now, 5 mana says hello, Tommy boy. Countering.
I just feel bad now for Marsh. No one should be subjected to this. I mean, he is a Rug Delver player, so I don't have a lot of sympathy for him. But man, this is just mean.
I mean, it's one thing. It is certainly one thing to have your counterbalance counter Force of Will via Force of Will.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to have your counterbalance real Devastation Tide and get that Force of Will right out of here.
I will say it is a little ironic that the deck that takes so much pleasure in denying other people their mana is sitting here, all his lands tapped down.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
A little thing we can enjoy that. Enjoy a little bit of the suffering there.
Yeah.
Just inflicted on everyone else, and now it goes around, comes around.
You say it, JT. So we are going to see. It looks like So top activation is going to be good to go. Looks like he's going to float that Devastation Tide around the top, which as he should.
Yep, no reason not to.
Make sure to keep countering all those Force of Wills. And right now you see Eric just looking for any way to close this game out, as we're going to see Eric play an island. And we'll see him pass the turn back most likely. So. Rill just looking for a way to close the game. Looking at his deck list here, he does have 2 more Vanillion Clicks, 2 more Snapcaster Mage, and another Talrand in his deck as well. So he does have ways, as we're going to see a Ancient Grudge take care of Shackles.
But now, once again, Marsh out of mana.
Yeah.
Spending all of his mana. Oop, that's unfortunate. They're back to basics, so he really is out of mana.
All right, so there goes the Vedalken Shackles. Not playing a huge role in this game, but
I don't actually like that play. I think the mana is way more important here.
You don't think that it warrants killing that ancient?
The only way you're winning this game, you're gonna guess now that they have the top counterbalance lock going. You're not even resolving Nimble Mongoose. Maybe there's nothing going on, so let's not worry about it. But I believe all even minimalist avenues of Marsh victory here have been exhausted now. I think we're all in on hoping Eric doesn't have any more spells in his deck and we can deck him.
The deck you plan.
Although countering this back to basics. Oh, and here comes that Devastation Tide, rearing its ugly, devastating head to counter another Force of Will.
So Dev Tide staying
Marsh
on
down
the
to
top.
1.
Down to 1. No fetch lands. Not that he has anything to fetch out anymore, but down to 1. No more Force of Wills, as we're going to see some movement here. You see back to basics Island and Devastation Tide are the cards that are being moved around here. Eric's just going to play at Island and say go. You see him picking up his pace of play right now because he knows he basically has a 1, does not want to get into draw territory. Well, I guess he's up a game, so draw territory is not something that can happen here. But just want to close this out.
I think he probably wants to grab a snack, grab a drink, use the restroom.
So we're going to see Sensei's Divine Top here. So double top, double counterbalance, double back to basics. Still had all these 3 pair, as they say in the poker world.
I think the play for Marsh is fetch. It's a strong play here.
Fetch?
Go out honorably, on your own terms.
And now we're going to see Snapcaster Mage off the top for Eric. He has finally found a way, as you do see him searching his graveyard here. When am I going to flash back? Looks like it's going to be a Brainstorm. He's going to cast this here, and we are going to see an eventual wrap to this matchup here. Mono Blue Talrand looks like it's going to take it 2-0 over Marsh Usary playing Rug Delver, and you see this deck looks like it is kind of geared towards trying to beat a Rug Delver strategy with the cards that are in the deck. And you see the top counterbalance lock, you see multiple back to basics, the Vedalken Shackles. There's a lot of cards that are good against Rug Delver.
Absolutely. And then we saw, Marsh enjoying the last few seconds of his camera time.
Hey, if
Looks
you're
at
in
the
there,
hand, lethal attack on the stack. Oh, all my lands are tapped. I have no more.
Hey,
I'm at 1 life.
If you're in there, you gotta stay in there. Soak it in.
Definitely run that land before.
Hey, you play slow enough. We've watched you on camera before.
I mean,
you take up all the camera time when you're on.
I just want to let the people enjoy a very well played long match of Magic.
I don't know anyone who plays slower on camera than you, actually.
That is certainly not true.